mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello and welcome, Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent McCory in for #the What. It is Wednesday, January the 4th, and this is Africa 54.
The Africa Center for Strategic Studies says rising sea levels will make so-called 100-year floods more frequent on the West Africa coast, as Henry Wilkins reports from Benin. Straight Talk Africa host Hayde Adams talks about enabling African students' U.S. university ambitions through the 8B Education Investments Initiative. The U.S. House of Representatives votes again Wednesday on electing a speaker after 3 failed tries on Tuesday. All this and much more on today's Africa 54.
Well, we begin in East Africa, where at least 35 people are dead following a twin car bombing attack in central Somalia. A local militia commander in the Hiram region says Al-Shabaab is claiming responsibility. 2 cars packed with explosives were simultaneously detonated in Mahas, a town in Hiram, where a major offensive was launched last year against the Al-Qaeda-linked militant group Al-Shabaab, which has been waging a years-long insurgency against the fragile central government. Into West Africa, where a new report by the Africa Center for Strategic Studies says, quote, once in 100 years floods will become more common in coastal communities due to rising sea levels caused by climate change. As a stretch of West Africa's coast is set to become an economic powerhouse, academics worry rising sea levels will stymie growth and impact the continent and the world. Henry Wilkins reports from Janvier, Benin.
Once-a-century floods are projected to start happening once every 40 years thanks to rising sea levels caused by climate change, according to the new report from the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, a US Department of Defense-funded think tank. Experts say the disruption to Africa's coastal and port cities will have a devastating impact on inland economic growth. On the outskirts of Benin's economic capital, Cotonou, dwellings in the town of Gamvi are built on stilts in a coastal lagoon. It's sometimes referred to as the Venice of Africa. Local government officials in the commune of Soava, where Gamvi is located, say flooding has gotten worse in recent decades.
Dans la commune de Soava ici, il y a 2 activités principales.
There are 2 primary economic activities here in the commune of Soava, agriculture and fishing. So when the water rises, the crops are destroyed. Also, the freshwater fish disappear. As a result, economic life becomes difficult.
The effects on the community have been devastating. Residents say their houses have been rendered uninhabitable and
many of our belongings were destroyed. Because of the flooding, the house you see was destroyed last year, and I had to rebuild it on another piece of land to prevent the water from coming in again.
He says he knows parents whose children drowned in the flooding. Alexandra Bodo, another Gamvi resident, says his livestock living in this pen were lost to the flood and the water filled his house to this level.
We lose our houses and we have no money to rebuild them, so the whole family sleeps in a boat.
Communities along the coast around estuaries and coastal lagoons like Gamvi will be the first to bear the brunt of the impacts. Flooding and coastal erosion will also affect Africa's ports. Not enough is being done, according to economists.
One of the things that I find shocking is how little finance is going to support these cities overall in terms of building infrastructure and services. But particularly with climate, it's extremely important that we not only adapt, but with the rising sea levels, that mitigation is taken into account as well.
Experts say the stretch of West Africa's coastline from Abidjan to Lagos is on track to become the world's largest megalopolis and could be home to 500 million people by the end of this century.
That's probably 50% of Africa's, or more than 50% of Africa's total GDP in that strip. So if it develops well, it could really anchor the continent, it could anchor the globe in terms of heading into this sustainable development.
Aside from Gamvi, Lagos and Ghana's capital of Accra experienced major floods in 2022. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Gamvi, Benin.
The French Foreign Ministry says Burkina Faso's transitional authorities sent a letter last month requesting the French ambassador leave the West African country. David Doyle has more.
Burkina Faso's junta has requested the departure of France's ambassador, the French Foreign Ministry has said. That apparent expulsion, said to have been requested in a letter sent last month, signals a further deterioration in relations between the West African country and its former colonial ruler. On Tuesday, a French Foreign Ministry spokeswoman confirmed receipt of the letter. She described the move as not standard practice and declined to give further details. The Burkinabe government declined to officially comment. France has maintained strong ties with Burkina Faso, where it has special forces stationed. But protests by opponents of the French military presence surged over the past year. That was partly due to perceptions that France has not done enough to tackle militants in the Sahel region. Prolonged insecurity has led to political instability. Burkina Faso witnessed coups in January and September last year. The second coup saw angry mobs targeting French institutions. Protesters demanded France to leave the country and called for authorities to turn to Russia for help in fighting militants, as has happened in neighbouring Mali. In late December, Burkinabe authorities ordered senior UN official Barbara Manzi to leave the country, accusing her of painting a negative picture of the country's security situation.
Well, that was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. Now, Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio recently spoke to VOA's Peter Cloete about initiatives under his leadership, including the recent signing of the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Bill. The law, he says, will ensure the protection of women and create a platform of empowerment. It also guarantees that 30% of women participate in both government and corporations.
What is contained in the bill, it's our goodies for women. It actually lays the foundation for the liberation of our women, to close the gender gap. That is the best way to put it. Of course, it took us a long time as a male society dominantly to accept that. It's been in Parliament for 8 months, but we got it out, and in the form and manner in which we want it. It basically gives 30% of representation in Parliament to women, and in all spheres of governance, even in corporate governance. So it is now incumbent upon us to really see how we can implement that to make sure that we start to close the gender gap. It is the gender gap, closing the gender gap is what this bill is really about. And that is what we have started. Before today, they did not have the chance. Women, we are not considered equal partners in development. And what we are saying is that you cannot say you're serious about development and you lock up more than 50% of your energy in the kitchen or somewhere else and then expect to make progress. For me, like I said, we are a development-oriented government, and therefore all the energy needed is what we want to unleash. And the women power, the component of the women have been missing. So we are giving quite a lot is done. In fact, before that, in Sierra Leone today, because of my own policy in education, all guys doing STEM courses or discipline can actually go to school free from pre-primary to the end of university once you are doing STEM courses. It will interest you to know that they have actually vindicated us, the girls, and they led the transition exam to university this year and in the past couple of years. So guys are leading now. And it is even more interesting to note that most of them actually applied for engineering because because they know that we are ready to pay for them. So quite a lot is happening in Sierra Leone for women and girls, and this bill is just a part of it. You're talking about protection of women. I had to declare a national emergency on rape, and we have toughened the laws on sexual and gender-based violence. We have even set up special courts to deal with them quickly, as and when there is need for them. And the First Lady has embarked on a national campaign, which is ongoing, called the Hands Off Our Girls, basically advocating for the girl child, to give them chance to go to school instead of giving their hands in marriage in a very tender age, teenage pregnancy, menstruation hygiene. So she distributes hygiene pads for them. Quite a lot is happening under very difficult circumstances, but I think the driving force has been the level of commitment, genuine commitment to making sure that we actually prepare Sierra Leone for the development it needs so that our people can be part of the 21st century, which means you have to unleash the power of women. And to unleash the power of women in future, you have to prepare the current generation of girls that are going to school.
That was Sierra Leone President Julius Maada Bio speaking with VOA's Peter Clotty. Now, the world is underinvesting in African brilliance. That's the view of Lydia Bosire, the founder and CEO of 8B Education Investments, a financial and education technology platform that specializes in lending to students from African countries. Bosire is spearheading a multi-million-dollar initiative that will help African students access the best universities in the United States. Hayde Adams, host of Straight Talk Africa, spoke to Bosire about the initiative.
The challenge that an African student who is ambitious faces is that they do not have the financing if the household income is insufficient or if they do not get a scholarship. As a result of that, there are many, many African students every year. Our estimate is that the financing gap is $25 billion a year worth of a financing gap of students that receive offers from global universities but do not have the means to finance the education and therefore cannot realize their highest potential. That is what the partnership with Nelnet Bank, which we were so grateful and pleased to announce at the recent Clinton Global Initiative meeting of 2022, is looking to solve, enabling African brilliance to have a global impact.
And speaking of that, there clearly seems to be a demand for African minds. And you talk about the world having underinvested in African brilliance. Please tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, Heidi, if you think about any graduate school in America, and let's take that to be a proxy for access to global innovation ecosystems, even while we know that there are many other places where the future is being built outside America. But if we focus on the US for a moment, there is somewhere in the order of 8 Indian graduate students for each 1 African. the continent is being outcompeted in innovation and losing the battle for building the future and participating in its building for the next 10, 15, 20 years. That is the challenge. We have to start from the assumption, Hayde, that brilliance is everywhere and that what differentiates who are the people that are building the future and those that aren't is access to opportunity. And where we see an avenue for providing that access to opportunity is financing African students who are ambitious, who are getting into global universities, who want to be the future heads of Alphabet and other global companies, but do not have the pathway to do that. And we enable that, and this funding partnership with Nelnet Bank is one of the ways of getting there.
Lydia, do you think on the continent itself enough is being done to invest in African brilliance? I mean, what's the responsibility of individual African countries to do exactly what would like the world to do, and that is invest in African minds and talents and innovation coming from the continent?
That's a really important question. There is so much to be done because we believe that the education sector, as many sectors, requires a symphony of solutions. We need to see more happening to enable literacy and primary education, a lot more to enable girls' education, secondary education, tertiary education in terms of both access and quality. All of that is being done and more needs to be done. The lane that we're working on is a very thin lane, which until now has only been filled by household income and scholarships. And those two do not meet the demand. So it is a both and, Hayde. We need to do more on the continent, and we need to unlock the leadership cadre that will steward Africa to the 21st century and into innovation and into participation. And that is the lane that we're focusing on.
Well, be sure to watch Hayde's full interview with Lydia Busiri coming up later today on Straight Talk Africa. What's still to come? Chaos reigns in the U.S. House of Representatives after 3 failed votes to elect a new speaker.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we begin 2023 with 2 women changemakers. Kawala, the first woman to run for president in Cameroon, talks about true leadership and the need for a sisterhood of activists from around the world. Lydia Busiri spearheads a multi-million-dollar lending program that enables students from Africa to attend universities in the United States. Join me, Hayde Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, the Malian Security Ministry says unidentified assailants killed 5 people in an attack on a civil defense post 80 kilometers southwest of Bamako late Monday. 2 members of the Civil Defense Force and 3 civilians were killed. Governor Maruna Bassi says that inflation is expected to average 11% in 2023. That's up from 8.3% in 2022. Abassi says the situation will be difficult if Tunisia does not reach a deal with the International Monetary Fund. And the Egyptian pound weakened to 26.5 to the dollar Wednesday, its biggest one-day move since the central bank allowed it to fall by 14.5% on October 27th. That's according to Refinitiv data. The pound was about 24.7 to the dollar at the opening of the trading day. And now the U.S. House of Representatives failed to choose its new Speaker of the House Tuesday as a group of conservative U.S. lawmakers continued to vote against the fellow Republican Kevin McCarthy's bid to lead the 118th session of Congress. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has more.
For the first time in 100 years, U.S. lawmakers in the House of Representatives have not elected a Speaker of the House in one round of voting, despite Republicans winning the majority.
The people across this great nation spoke loudly and clearly that they wanted a new direction. They wanted a new direction to stop this radical far-left agenda, to hold Joe Biden accountable, and to save the United States of America.
After 3 rounds and several hours of voting, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy still could not command the 218 votes, a simple majority of the 434 members of the U.S. House needed to be elected.
A speaker has not been elected.
Republicans hold a narrow lead in the incoming U.S. House of Representatives, meaning McCarthy can lose only 4 votes and still be elected as Speaker. As many as 20 conservative Republicans objected to his candidacy.
The guy that wants to be Speaker agrees that Washington is broken. And he said as much in one of his most recent correspondences. Interestingly enough, over the 14 years that he's been in leadership, he's done almost virtually nothing to change it.
And instead voted for conservative Republican Jim Jordan.
Maybe the right person for the job of Speaker of the House isn't someone who wants it so bad.
All 212 House Democrats voted for incoming Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries to serve as Speaker of the House.
Madam Clerk, a Latino is nominating for leader of this chamber, a black man for the first time in our history.
But with Jeffries and McCarthy unable to command 218 votes, it appears a compromise candidate must emerge. U.S. House lawmakers cannot be sworn in, and no legislating or committee business can happen until a speaker is chosen. The House will meet again Wednesday to resume a 4th round of voting. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
Well, for more insight on the U.S. House of Representatives' failure to choose its next Speaker of the House on Tuesday, let's go to VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson. Hello, Catherine. Now, after 3 failed votes to be elected as Speaker, where does Kevin McCarthy and the House go from here?
Well, quite frankly, Kevin McCarthy's position right now does not look good. He is one of the only people in U.S. history who has failed on this level. You know, as I mentioned in that package, this is the first time in 100 years that the vote for the Speaker of the House has gone past 1 round of voting. Almost always, you see every single member of each party vote for their party's nominated leader. This is really unprecedented territory that we're in right now, and it's going to be very interesting to see how many rounds of voting the U.S. House of Representatives has an appetite for today, when it looks like overnight, really, Kevin McCarthy was not able to gain more support, and no other candidate has yet emerged as that compromise candidate.
Now, some of our viewers may want to know, what is it that those who are objecting want in their candidate that McCarthy doesn't have?
That's a fascinating question here in U.S. politics. This has been brewing among Republicans for many, many years now. And quite frankly, it kind of went underground during the Trump presidency because Republicans were so focused on what was going on with Donald Trump. But back during the presidency of Barack Obama, Republicans really started to have this conservative wing of the party that objected to big government, that objected to a lot of the rules that had come in the U.S. House of Representatives, some checks and balances on the power of the Speaker. That's what they're objecting to now. They want a lot more power, and they're asking for even increased power to put investigations into President Joe Biden into place. They want an independent legal entity to investigate him. They want to disempower some of the executive branch here in the United States. So far, Kevin McCarthy has acceded to all of those demands. So what it really comes down to is that they just personally do not like Kevin McCarthy. They think that he is not ideologically aligned with them. They don't trust him, and they don't really have faith that he's going to be able to go up against the Democrats and really be a check on their power. So it's going to be really interesting to see who emerges as that compromise candidate. Who will the conservatives trust enough to put in that position of power?
And you talk about, waiting to see, but at this moment, is there any kind of indication of who could be that compromise candidate?
Well, right now, the only Republican who has votes other than Kevin McCarthy is one of the conservatives, Jim Jordan. He got 20 votes in the final round of voting on Tuesday. He'll more than likely get some additional votes in the rounds of voting Wednesday. I also think we're going to see that compromise candidate start to emerge as members of the U.S. House of Representatives get tired of these endless rounds of voting. They take about an hour each. Members do not like having to sit in that chamber. I think you're probably going to see Steve Scalise, who is also a member of the Republican leadership and who you may remember almost died in that shooting on a baseball field a couple of years ago. He may be the person that can get those conservatives peel away enough votes to get that key 218 number that they need to get an elected Speaker of the House.
Brilliant reporting, Catherine. Thank you very much. And that's VOA's congressional correspondent, Catherine Gibson, joining us from here in Washington. And now solar panels have mushroomed on rooftops and on the ground in many parts of the world. But they also can be placed on bodies of water, as VOA's chief national correspondent, Steve Herman, reports. The floating solar technology has taken off on a large scale in Asia and Europe and is now beginning to heat up in North America.
One of the hottest innovations for the non-polluting generation of electricity is floating photovoltaics, or FPV, which involves anchoring solar panels in bodies of water, including lakes, reservoirs, and seas. Floating solar projects are even more attractive when they can be built on bodies of water adjacent to hydropower plants with existing transmission lines. According to Sika Gonzaku, a researcher at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Colorado.
So instead of depending so much on hydro, now you can use more FPV, reduce your dependence on hydro during very dry seasons, use your floating photovoltaics.
5,000 solar panels now float on one of the wastewater ponds of the town of Windsor in California, says council member Deborah Fudge.
And they also provide 90% of the power that we need for all of the operations for treating wastewater, for all the operations at our corporation yard, and also for pumping our wastewater to the geysers, which is a geothermal field about 40 miles north.
This lake in Virginia is one of about 25,000 bodies of water in the United States identified by the government as suitable for FPV placement. Floating panels covering 1/4 the area of each of these sites would potentially generate nearly 10% of America's energy needs. Steve Herman, VOA News, at Smith Lake in Stafford, Virginia.
From around the world, let's go.
Well, be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.